Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Godson. I'm CEO of Momentum Event Group. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here today for this webinar entitled New gTLDs, the Practicalities of a Domain Launch, led by Roland LaPlante, Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at Afilias. Mr. LaPlante, as many of you will know, oversaw the marketing and launch planning for .info in 2001 and the transition and launch of every TLD supported by Afilias ever since. Before I hand it over to Mr. LaPlante, I have a couple of housekeeping issues. Firstly, the slides for this presentation will be made available afterwards. If you want a copy of those slides, please do email me. My email is matt@momentumevents.com. We are also recording this presentation, so that will also be made available, and I will send out a link to everybody that's either registered or attended this presentation after the presentation, letting you know when that is available. Mr. LaPlante will be taking Q&A after the formal presentation. Using the GoToMeeting chat panel, which you should see on the right-hand side at the bottom of your GoToMeeting panel, you will be able to ask questions. If you send those over, I will make sure that those are sent or posed to Mr. Roland LaPlante at the end of the presentation. With that being said, it's my great presentation. It's my great pleasure to hand over to Roland for the remainder of this presentation. Roland?
Great. Thanks, Matt. Can you hear me okay, Matt?
I can hear you perfectly.
All right. Very good. Well, we've got some very interesting stuff to talk about today. Now that the new gTLDs are beginning to launch, a lot of folks are worried about, geez, what do I do now? I mean, we've all been waiting 5 years, 6 years, 8 years for this, and now it's actually upon us. So it's really time to start thinking about some of the real detail-y stuff in the launches. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some background first, just to set the stage for this. I've said many times, this is not new gTLDs are not new, and that's certainly the case. From 2001 to 2004, ICANN introduced 14 new generic top-level domains into the root. Info, Mobi, Pro, Arrow, Asia, Biz, Cat, Co-op, Jobs, Museum, Name, Tell, Travel, XXX. I mean, these have all been in the root now for 10 years or so. And there are still people who haven't heard of some of these, unfortunately. We fought that battle on info for a very long time, especially at the very beginning when there were only the original ones in the root, and browsers and emails and all that kind of thing were all pretty much hardwired for just those TLDs. Things have gotten better since then, but the problems are not altogether fully solved. Now, Afilias itself is supporting Info, Mobi, and Pro as the registry operator. We also do the back-end support for Arrow, Asia, XXX, and we also do the back-end for .me, which launched during the same time period. EU launched also, which makes the total count 16 new TLDs. And if you add .post to that, which launched a year and a half ago, that brings the total to about 17. Pretty good number of registrations in ME and EU. Post is really just getting started. So in 2011, ICANN finally approved the applicant guidebook to allow the new program that encourage basically unlimited numbers of applications to come in for new TLDs. They got 1,930 applications for all kinds of different things: brands, cities, generics, communities, all kinds of things, some very interesting. And now that it's 2014, a number of IDNs have launched. I think .Berlin is now in the root from the city standpoint. But a lot more coming: NYC, Miami, Istanbul, Helsinki, Stockholm, a lot more cities coming in. A lot of generics, as you know. More than 100 of these are now live in the root. Most of those are generics, and there are hundreds more to go live in the near future. So we are now getting into the blitz here in terms of new TLDs and what that means. So let's talk about some of the lessons from the previous launches that I think might be interesting to you and informative, because a lot of people don't have all these facts handy to them, and hopefully the folks in the audience will find this interesting. The domain market through December of 2013, just a month ago, a month and a half ago, was at 270 million names. Now it's been growing steadily for a very long time. You can see the volume trends. The source of this data is Zuknik, which tracks this stuff over time. We were at about 50 million names way back in 2003. This doesn't show the info launch back in 2001 or Biz or a few of the other ones that launched earlier than that. But I can tell you from having looked at that data that it's been a very steady growth with a little bit of a bump in 2008, 2009 when domain tasting got popular. But other than that, the overall domain business, including gTLDs and country codes, has been pretty steady. This is remarkable in that you don't see big spikes here when new TLDs launched. Info was the largest new TLD, and there was really not really a big spike there either because the market was too big and it just absorbed that new volume. So that brings us to the question of, is this a market share game, or are the new TLDs going to actually deliver market expansion? And the answer to that really at this point is nobody knows. But I can tell you from the past that I don't think the new TLDs have generated a lot of brand new registrations to the industry. That is, I don't think they've contributed a huge amount to market expansion. Now, you could argue, well, these are boring strings and they're not all that interesting and they don't add all that much value, and therefore, why should those strings attract any new entrants or new registrants into the business? And the new gTLDs with such a broad range may very well do that. I am hopeful that they will, but nobody really knows. So the market's been growing about 10% a year since 2009. You can see the long-term growth trends here, and these are market numbers year over year. And back in 2006, 2007, we were in the 30% growth range. Again, that was when the economies of the world were pretty strong. Tasting was rampant in the business. That's now been stamped out. And then when the economies all went south, so did the domain business in general. But it never stopped growing. It only ever got to a little over 5% growth, which is a business really a lot of people would have liked to be in at that time. So you can see, though, since 2009 or so, 2010, it's been in the 5 to 10% range every year. So 5 or 10% on 270 million names gives us about 2.7 million names per year. Actually, that's 27 million names a year. But that includes ccTLDs and Common Net, which is pretty tough competition. Common Net all by themselves are about half of all of this business. Then you've got very strong ccTLD competitors. So at the end of the day, the available market for new TLDs may be a little bit smaller than this. So overall, these 16, 17 new TLDs with Post have gained about a 7% market share to date. So they haven't, they've been, a lot of them have been very successful, but I don't think any of them have burned the barn down, and we certainly don't have any what I would call legitimate challengers to .com. I mean, we had all hoped for that back in 2000, 2001 in the first round, but I don't think we've seen that to date. So what are the lessons here? I've kind of broken this up into broad appeal TLDs and then .brand type TLDs because I think they're dramatically different in terms of the goals and some of the issues that they're going to face. So let's talk about the broad appeal TLDs first. These, I think, are items like city TLDs, the generics, and many of the .idns. So if you look at the broad appeal TLDs, only .me has sold more than 1 million names since .mobi launched. These figures here show the total number of domains under management by the newly launched TLDs over this period of time. This goes through about the middle of 2005. Things haven't changed a huge amount since then. So info got up to about 8 million names. EU got up to about 3 million, a little over 3 million. Biz got up to a couple of million. Mobi got up to 1 million, and then all of the others were in the sub 500,000 range. So, 500,000 names is still a pretty good number for domain sales, but it certainly isn't going to challenge COM, and it's, I think you can run a successful TLD at those levels, but you've got to be really careful about expenses and so forth. So the next item here is about distribution, and this is really a very important learning from the new TLDs that have launched so far. It's very critical to a new TLD success because you don't want to be advertising or doing PR work or whatever to empty shelves. You've got to have distribution with the main registrars where registrants typically would go to find new TLDs. So when you look at the number of registrars who are carrying a particular TLD, you see almost the same list of names as you saw on the volume front. So info's at the top with about 400 registrars signed up. Biz is next. Then you've got Moby, you've got Name, Asia, Tel, and then a bunch down here at the bottom that have less than 50. So you've got 6 TLDs, and again, these are only the ICANN TLDs. This doesn't count ME, which is a country code, or EU, which is, I guess, a country code as well. And of course, it doesn't have post in here just yet, but post really isn't in very broad distribution anyway. So you've got 6 TLDs that have between 100 and 400 registrars. Now, right now there are about 1,000 ICANN accredited registrars on the planet. When you look on the ICANN site and you look at the list of accredited registrars, you're going to see around 1,000 names. There are really a handful, 25 or so, that really make a difference in terms of volume. But obviously, broader distribution is better than less distribution because these smaller TLDs, the ones that got a smaller amount of volume, have really only been able to attract about 50 or fewer registrars to sell them. Now, for some of the niche-oriented TLDs that have very they have very good controls over who is eligible for the TLDs. This is mostly in the sponsored TLD area. You probably don't need a lot of registrars, but you do need some in order to make sure that potential customers can find your TLD. Now, COM, of course, has all of the registrars because everybody carries COM. And while COM had over about 900 TLDs back in 2011, the rest of those 100 all have .com now. So the next item is adoption. I think it's pretty important. Afilias really started pioneering this stuff back in 2001 when we launched .info because we wanted to know not only how many names were sold, but how many names went into usage and what kind of usage they went into. So we developed a research technique where we go out and touch every name in the zone file and try to figure out what's going on at that address. So I think the success of a TLD is eventually going to be found in usage, which you can measure, and traffic, which is a little bit harder to measure at the TLD level. The reason it's harder to measure the traffic is even though the registry is going to see all the DNS traffic that comes through, you're going to see it at the TLD name server level, and most of the queries are going to be cached somewhere else in the system at the ISP level or somewhere else. So you're not going to see all the raw queries that come in. You're only going to see the ones that touch the name server where the address isn't already cached. So let's take a look at this, what we call the domain scan analysis. We broke up the, when we go out and look at a registration, this is the .info information. First thing we look and see if there's a site there. If there's no site, then we call it an inactive site. And there's a lot of reasons why somebody might have an inactive site. For example, it might be intellectual property protection, in which case they don't have it. They don't have anything at the address. They just want to keep the name so that no one else can get it. And in .info, it's about 30. It's around about 35%, which is about the industry average. Most of the large TLDs don't have 100% activity in their files. Most of them have, between 30, 35, maybe 40% of the names are just sitting in the file and not in the zone file where they'd be active. So all the rest of them are active sites, and the question is what's going on at those active sites? We used to see a large number of parked sites, but now this is down in the 1-2% range because monetization or putting up a pay-per-click site is now a much better way for registrars to monetize those names than just simply putting them on a park site. So we've got about 2% of the sites are parked in .info. We've got another set of names that are redirected to another TLD. This goes to a com or an org, for example. There's about 30% of the names that go there. There's another 14% or so that are referral and monetization sites. And then in this set of data, about 19% of the names look to us like they have original content. And this is where the sweet spot in the franchise is. If you can get a higher percentage of names that are what we call dedicated sites, that is, other sites will redirect to that site, or it has original content on it, then that's where you're going to. That's the strongest part of your franchise. Now, if you do further analysis on this, you find out that the dedicated sites have a very high level of renewal. So it's important to know this from a financial standpoint, because it's really good to track this because it helps you predict renewal capability. The inactive sites, if they're intellectual property protection type, then you're probably going to get renewals, but many of the other ones you will not get renewals. So this is kind of a canary in the coal mine in terms of what kind of renewals you're going to get, and the renewals will drive the long-term viability of the TLD from a financial standpoint. Okay, so some of the learnings from the broad appeal TLDs are that if you're looking for large volume, you're going to have to be patient. Large volume is going to take time. Even in the new TLD launches that have taken place so far, we're not seeing tens of thousands of names or hundreds of thousands of names being taken up in the land rush, which is what has occasionally happened historically. There doesn't seem to be a huge pent-up demand for namespace, but people are finding some of the new TLDs to be reasonably attractive. So if you're looking for large volume, be patient and work that over time. From a distribution standpoint, you should really get your distribution right at the beginning. The reason for that is that the launch is the best time and the best reason for registrars to carry you now. If you've already launched and there isn't a lot of volume and there are 25 other launches that are coming, it's going to be very hard to get your TLD back in the queue because registrars are going to be busy elsewhere. So do it as early as you can. Get your guys out in the field, talk to all the top registrars. Most of the top registrars are very open to carrying new TLDs. They want to carry as many as possible. They have set up their systems to carry as many as possible, and they're looking for this new inventory and for new things to offer to their customers. But you've got to get in early. If you get distribution, it's going to help you get awareness for your TLD because it'll be in the registrar list. They'll be able to send out notifications to their customer bases of registrants. That'll help push sales. That will help stimulate usage, and again, acceptance of the TLD in the broad internet, and that in turn will be a virtuous circle and generate more sales. So as I said, if your launch is slow, it's going to be really hard for you to regain momentum afterwards. And it's also important to note, and many, particularly companies, don't know this, is that ICANN cannot compel registrars to carry your TLD, nor can they compel ISPs to enable your email to work, or all the people that have forms on the internet to enable those forms to work with your TLD. ICANN plays an important role in identifying what are the authorized TLDs. But in terms of getting your TLD accepted, both at the registrar level and in the channel, in the chain, that is really going to be up to you. And in order to get distribution, you've got to have channel knowledge. So which are the main registrars? There are a lot of sites that list, which registrars are the largest, and then you need to find out who to talk to. And most of the folks on this call, I think, have suppliers and supporters who can advise you about who to talk with at particular registrars and what kind of registrar might be best for your TLD. So that's volume and distribution. In terms of adoption, new TLDs are new products for people. Customers have to get used to them. You have to build awareness and trust in what does this TLD stand for, why is it different and better, why is it unique. You've got to get the word out on that in order to develop the demand. And then you've got to, work with your registrants and so forth to make sure that that promise gets delivered. One way to monitor, you really need to monitor the indicators about adoption. We talked about the usage. There may be some ways to generate traffic. And frankly, there may be some unique new ways to monitor adoption that we haven't come across yet. And from an administration standpoint, I didn't really talk much about administration in the earlier slides, but your policies, for example, you really need to do your policies right the first time. And if you don't know what what the implications of the policies are, work with your suppliers, work with your helpers, work with your consultants, and make sure you get your policies nailed down. The last thing you want is to do policies and then change them again in any material way 6 months down the line, because it changes the rules for everybody, and it's just a huge mess. So make sure you do that right the first time. Okay, so that's volume TLDs. I think brands are quite a bit different. For most brands that I've talked to, volume of sales, even sales at all, are not the key. People don't care about that. And therefore, distribution is not as critical. Indeed, many brands don't even want a lot of registrars working on their business, and some of them are even going to be their own registrar. Adoption, however, is going to be critical. One of the things that I know people are most worried about is how are they going to migrate their traffic from the current sites that they have, their heritage sites. Many of them are in COM or in a country code, but they've built a presence there. They've educated their customer bases about this. People know where to find them already. How is that going to change to the .brand? And that's something that you need to sit down with your web people, with your internet marketing people, and figure out how to do this slowly and gradually over time. Nobody is advocating that you give up your .com site anytime soon. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's wise for that to happen. But 5 years from now, most of the people who do business with a brand are going to be going to the .brand site. And somehow, between now and that time, there has to be a deliberate program, and it'll be different for every brand that helps your customers migrate from where you are today to where you want them to be in the future. So I think there's going to be a lot of lessons learned on this. There are a number of ongoing internet conferences, domain conferences that are being hosted around the world. Folks are getting into these issues now. Nobody's actually had the experience yet, so we're seeing a lot of speculation, a lot of judgment, a lot of projections, a lot of forecasting, but no actual experience on this issue. So I think it'll be interesting to go to these domain conferences in the coming months and listen to people who've actually been through this. And hopefully most of the brands that have applied will feel comfortable sharing their experience, or at least some of their experience, in how to do this. Okay, so brands actually do have a lot of real benefits to having their own TLD. So for example, eligibility, let me see here. Hold on, I'm gonna pull all this stuff up all at once. Well, one of the things I would compliment the brands who have applied already is I really think you guys have been very visionary. When this new program was announced, it was not at all clear that this was something that you ought to spend $200,000 or $500,000 or $1 million to get into. So the brands that took that step, that took that risk, I think are now going to reap the benefits of having an internet address, an internet property that will put them, I think, head and shoulders above competitors. Now, as registry operators, because the brand owners that have TLDs now will be official registry operators, there's some things that you can control now that you never could control in the past. So the first thing is eligibility. You can decide exactly who is eligible to have a name in your TLD and who is not eligible to have a name. This is important because it'll really help you build trust on the internet in your brand, particularly if you're selling financial services or luxury goods. You know, there's such a lot of crime related to those two categories in particular that if you can educate your customers to come to a TLD with your name on it and not anywhere else, and to have them type that name in, they will be assured that they're actually going to get to your site and not to some bogus counterfeiter who's trying to phish them or conduct some other criminal activity there. So controlling eligibility is a huge benefit. The other thing you can do here is determine how each TLD is used, or how each registration in your TLD is used. So for example, if you have retailers or a distribution channel, a dealer network, for example, that you want to authorize to have names in your TLD, or even compel, because of your franchise license, them to use a name in your TLD for security purposes, you can decide what is acceptable use on those TLDs and what is not acceptable use. And the power that you have there is when somebody does something that you disagree with, something that violates their acceptable use policy that you have in place with them, you can take them off the internet almost immediately. This is a control that you do not have in .com or .net or any of the generic TLDs, but it's one that you have with your own TLD, and I think that's an important benefit. Another benefit is that these will all be DNSSEC secured. These are DNSSEC security extensions, which I'm not going to get into because it's too detailed and too technical, but it's a level of encryption that's required by ICANN on every new TLD that's going out there. Not necessarily every second level registration is going to have this, but it will certainly be signed at the root. And I would encourage you to sign each individual name as well. And that'll help to stymie hijacking and phishing and other kinds of evil. So at last, brands can have a space on the internet that gives them control and security. And I think that's a dramatic step forward in terms of the value that the internet space can deliver. So if you don't have your own domain, and I think there are a few folks here that did not apply, or if you plan to get one in the next round, your competitors likely are going to have one. So the competitive advantages will place TLD owners literally years ahead in establishing a unique internet presence. And you've got to monitor this and really pay close attention to round two and get in there. You should really be monitoring anybody in your space that has one of these, anybody in a related space that has one, that has their own TLD, just to learn what they're doing so that when you get your own, you won't make the same kinds of mistakes. So potential results of owning a domain, or the potential benefits, the more potential benefits of owning your own domain, is that you can start migrating customers to your own social networks. I see a lot of brands that are driving people to Facebook, and it makes me crazy. Facebook is an important network. It's a great place to meet new people, but you eventually want these people on your, under your own control. This big data, all the data that Facebook and other social networks are collecting about your customers belongs to them, and it really should belong to you, where you can do something useful with it. Having your own TLD also establishes your brand as an innovator in your space, and it can help reinforce consumer trust in your brand for the reasons I talked about earlier. It's just going to be a lot more difficult for criminals to penetrate your TLD and do anything evil to your customers because you'll be controlling that experience. So there's a number of administrative things that you need to worry about here. I call it administrivia. Because ICANN has a number of requirements in the contracts that if you've read the contracts in detail, you'll know that the registry operator now has signed up for a number of administrative projects, a number of administrative tasks that ICANN is very serious about getting done. So they really act as a regulator in the naming system, and they're going to regulate registry operators in a I don't know if this could be called a heavy-handed way, but they certainly have a significant compliance department, much bigger than they've ever had in the past, and they're beginning to follow up on all of these things to make sure that they get done. And there's three areas: there's compliance, policies, and security. So in the compliance area, they're going to require you, and some of this is very detailed. You know, you're going to have a registry website. You're going to have a point of contact for ICANN. You're going to have to coordinate with the trademark clearinghouse in regard to trademarks when you launch your TLD, and for the first, I think it's 90 days thereafter. You're going to have to worry about accreditation of registrars and the operational testing and evaluation process that allows them to interact with the registry system in a safe and secure way. You're going to have to worry about registry analytics and reporting. You're going to have to deliver 24/7 customer service support, or have somebody on your team who does that. The URS procedure compliance you'll have to worry about. And you'll have to worry about the code of conduct compliance and monitoring how that's done. So from a policy standpoint, there are many ICANN policy issues with the various consensus policies that have been put out, with the PICs that many people have signed up to do, and then sort of the standard policies as well. There's all of the intellectual property rights protection administration stuff. We talked about the trademark clearinghouse, the uniform rapid suspension, PDDRP, post-delegation dispute resolution process, and many, many, many other acronyms that are going to be foreign to most people not in the industry. ICANN is now making a project out of having more and more acronyms. And there's a lot more stuff. Escrow coordination. This isn't financial escrow. This is coordinating the regular dumps of the data in your registry, the list of the names, the IP addresses, the contacts, and so forth and so on, that your services provider has to provide to whoever you've designated as an escrow provider. And they're generally Iron Mountain or NCC takes care of that. And then, of course, registrar agreement compliance. There's also security stuff to worry about. Security policy administration. There's website security. Each website has to have a security section. You've got to have reporting on all the security issues. You need an abuse point of contact that anyone from the public can report to you, or ICANN can report to you. You have to worry about security feeds and subscriptions, and then you've got to track all the evil stuff that goes on: phishing, botnets, fast flux. Even if you don't expect to have any of this stuff, which frankly most brands aren't going to have. So security is an important thing, and as I said, take a look at all of the, I think there are now 11 specs on the that are attached to the basic ICANN registry operator agreement. And each of the provisions in that are going to be tracked by ICANN, and somebody at your organization or your providers has to do that. There are lots of helpers in the industry around who can provide support in these areas. People that really understand this, people that have done this before. Afilias provides some of these services as well, but there's a lot of great providers who can deliver this kind of help. So you can focus on building your business and not on all of this administrivia that ICANN is going to foist upon you as a registry operator. So nothing's impossible, but knowledge is the first step. And I encourage you to I know most of the people on this call have some experience in this field already, but build your education in that of the brand that you're working for, if you're on a brand, so you can educate consumers effectively and take the leadership role. One of the upcoming domain conferences or information conferences that's coming up is this Momentum Digital Marketing and gTLD Strategy Congress in New York here in another couple of weeks. There's a lot of I think new stuff that's going to be presented at this. These new TLDs are now launching, and we've got the guys from .uno and .buzz are going to be talking with John Kane, who's from Afilias, in one of the opening sessions. There's John Nevitt from Donuts is going to be there to talk. The guy from .tickets is going to come and talk. Akram Atala from ICANN, who's running the whole new TLD program, is going to come and do a keynote. Pardon me. So I think it'll be pretty interesting. That's just day one. On day two, we've got Jen Wolf. We've got Sarah Feingold from Etsy. We've got the guy who's doing IBM social strategy. We've got somebody from Ogilvy 1 coming. So there's going to be a lot of new, interesting perspective, I think, at this. And given that these new TLDs are now beginning to launch, I think that'll be a fascinating Congress to go to. And it's only a couple days long, and it's conveniently in New York. We're a sponsor of this, of course. We've sponsored all of these gTLD strategy congresses. I think this is the 4th one. And we found them to be a great source of new information and a great way to meet new folks in the industry that are just coming in. So if anybody has any questions, please, or if you want to copy the presentation, you can email Matt at momentumevents.co. It's not com, it's co. Or my address, Roland LaPlante, rlaplante@affiliates.info, is there as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt and address any questions that may come up.
Thank you so much, Roland. That was fantastic. Thank you very much for that excellent presentation. With regards to the email address, .co or .com will work. So you can have it either way. So Matt at momentumevents.co or Matt at momentumevents.com. We do have a couple of questions if you've got the time to handle them. Firstly is, and I guess this is the $64 billion question, when do you think ICANN is likely to open round 2?
Well, you're right. That is the $64,000 question. The answer is nobody really knows. There are those who say, well, geez, it took 6, 7 years for this round. It'll probably take another 6 or 7 years. I'm not in that school. I think we solved most of the major problems in this round. That's why it took so long to get the guidebook together. I am in the 1 to 2 year range in terms of what I would guess. And the reason I say that is particularly when these brands roll out, their competitors in their spaces who did not apply, I think are going to come to believe that they are now on an uneven playing field. And I think there'll be a lot of pressure on ICANN to even up the playing field again and let other people into the route so that they can start to enjoy these benefits as well. So I think there's probably a 1 to 2 year runway for all the folks who applied in this round. And then there'll be, which is enough time to really take advantage of this. It'll be a great head start for all the folks that applied in round 1. But I think there'll be a lot of pressure on ICANN to open round 2. And sooner rather than later. Now, ICANN's got a bunch of work to do before they're going to be willing to open round 2. They need to analyze the results of round 1 and make sure there weren't any particularly technical stability or security issues that arose that were not anticipated in as part of the round 1 activity. And I don't know how long that's going to take. I hope that's not that doesn't take very long. And that they can expeditiously get the next round out without a lot of changes from round 1, pardon me, in sometime in the next couple of years.
Okay, that's great. Why do you think that the new TLDs have only ever gotten 7% of the market? Do you think this is going to change with the next round, with this current round?
That's a good question. I do hope it will change. I am hopeful that the inherent appeal in this wide range of new strings that have come in is going to attract more registrants to the market and give people more of a sense that they can own a domain name. It's a pretty small number of people on the planet that own a domain name now. Even though everybody's on the internet, nobody really considers owning a domain name or an address on the internet, aside from an email address, to be doable. I mean, it seems really technical. But all that is changing with website builders and other kinds of activity that makes these things a lot easier to use and get value out of. So I think over time, these new TLDs will attract more folks. I think that can increase the rate of growth in the market by maybe 50%. Maybe it'll grow 15% instead of just 10%. And I think the 7% is more related to unfamiliarity. This is all new, don't know what to do with it, kinds of things that I think the business is pretty much over now.
Okay. What's the secret to success for a TLD with a small volume?
I think financially the main issue for TLDs that have small volume is to be very conservative with expenses. It's very tempting to spend lots of money on advertising and PR and other kinds of sales activity as you try to establish your name in the marketplace. Fortunately, unlike back in 2001 when Info was launched, there are a lot more efficient mechanisms now with social media to get the word out. And if you can do something interesting that doesn't cost a lot of money, you can generate a lot of awareness relatively quickly. So I think the real secret here is, especially if you're in this as a for-profit kind of an experience, is to really keep a close eye on expenses and try not to let that get ahead of your revenue stream, your actual revenue stream.
Some TLDs have been available for weeks already. Do you have any insight on how they're actually selling?
Yes. Domain Insight, Kevin Murphy's blog, is tracking this pretty closely. So if you look at the first few here, we've got Guru is at about 21,000 names. Bike has got about 5,500 names. Clothing is now at 4,800. Singles, 3,500. Ventures, 2,600. Plumbing, 1,800. Holdings, 1,500. And there's an Arabic string here that's got about 1,200 in it. Now, it doesn't surprise me, frankly, that the Arabic string is the smallest. I think the IDNs are going to have a very difficult time getting adopted because not only is it a new string, it looks entirely different than anything anyone's seen on the internet in the past. So I think those are going to be challenging. But notice that even with these results so far, the first few weeks, there's nobody that's at 100,000 names, 150,000 names. We're not seeing these giant land rushes that we saw some of them in the past. We're seeing a much more deliberate, careful rollout of these things, and I think with careful attention to the expenses related to rolling these out, these can individually be quite successful. They can be quite good for the registrants that are in them, but they won't necessarily be huge money makers or challengers to .com, for example.
We had a couple of questions about the registrars. You spent a lot of time talking about the registrars. A couple of people asked who they could talk to about registrars, which ones to choose, and who to talk with at the registrars.
Well, most companies who have done their applications now have consultants or their registry services provider or other folks on their team who are familiar with the space and are familiar with the registrars. And I would really tap those people to help advise you on which registrars might be particularly appropriate for that product or for that string, and who is the right contact there to talk about. Many of the big registrars have been pretty active in these domain conferences, so sometimes attending one of the conferences, you can talk to the GoDaddy people, for example. Enum is pretty active around here, and a number of the other big registrars are also available at these conferences to talk to. And of course, you could always go to an ICANN conference. I think the next one is in Singapore, coming up at the end of March, and all the big registrars will be there, and many of the smaller ones as well.
Great. You mentioned that brands can take sites off the internet. Can you describe how that happens?
Sure. As the registry operator, if you find a site that is failing to meet your expectations or violating the code of conduct or your terms of use or any of that, you can simply talk to your registry services provider, tell them to remove the DNS records from the name, and that name will disappear off the internet. Now, it won't disappear immediately because the address does get cached, and depending on the length of the caching longevity, it may take a few days for it to actually come down, but then it'll be down completely. So it's a pretty easy process from the standpoint of the brand owner or the registry operator.
Okay, that's great. What pricing strategies are you seeing the new gTLDs use?
Well, there's two basic areas. One is make them fairly inexpensive in the $10 range at the registrar level. That is the wholesale price from the registry to the registrar. And then there are some like .luxury who are much higher than that. So I think it remains to be seen which strategies will be most successful. I think the pricing has to be consistent with the imaging and the positioning and the and how you want to present that TLD. So it's hard to tell which one of these are going to be the most successful, but we're seeing quite a wide range of pricing in the market. We're not seeing any really cheap, you know, like $1, that kind of thing. We're mostly seeing folks at on the low end at about the $10 level. That may change, but that's where we are today.
That's great. You mentioned Kevin Murphy's blog, Domain Insight. We actually had a question about how that is spelled. It's domain, INCITE.com, for those of you that wanted to know where to find Kevin Murphy's blog.
Correct.
You mentioned something, you mentioned a slow launch in your slide presentation. Can you elaborate on what a slow launch means?
What that really talks about is how long it takes for the volume to build over time. You know, I think coming out of the gate when you're brand new, I think is the time to make your news and to get your distribution and so forth. There will be specific domains tailored to individual audiences where it's going to take time to build the awareness and so forth. So that's if that helps.
Understood. Okay. All right. This is a technical question, so I hope I get this correct. We had a question that was, the public comment period closed in January for the proposal for a specification 13 to the ICANN registry agreement to contractually reflect certain limited aspects of .brand new gTLDs. Do you have any update for when a final specification 13 will be launched for applicants to sign?
The answer is no, I do not. Sorry.
Okay, fair enough. All right. It's always amusing when the question is longer than the answer. We have one more question, which is regarding your administrivia, your ICANN administrivia. And the question is ICANN serious about all of that detail? A lot of it is irrelevant or seems irrelevant to my brand. Do we still need to do it?
Well, the answer is yes. These registry operator contracts are designed to be the same contract for everybody, and most applicants or most registry operators will sign them pretty much as is. I'm sure there'll be some wiggles here and there, but ICANN is serious about it. I mean, they are under a lot of public scrutiny to ensure the stability and security of the root and the internet itself. And they've devised these various monitoring mechanisms to enable them to do that job. And they've also, you know, partly because of the big increase in the budget related to these new TLDs and the money that's coming with the applications, have also been able to field a much more robust and professional compliance organization that will be reviewing various things on some kind of a schedule, and all of that stuff that's required in all of those exhibits, all those attachments to the registry operator, they really are serious about that. And as a registry operator, your best course of action is to make sure you comply with that 100%, so you don't have any troubles down the road.
Okay, that's great. We actually had one of the attendees to the webinar, Philip Shepard of the Brand Registry Group, actually commented on the question regarding specification 13, and he updates us that the BRG is pushing ICANN to have this rolled out. Asked ICANN last Friday, and they are pushing for it to be launched before the Singapore ICANN meeting. So that's just an update from Philip Shepard.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you very much, Philip. Well, with that's the end of all the questions that we have. I want to thank you again, Roland, for taking the time to address us all today again. It was a fantastic presentation, and also thank you very much for taking all the questions as well. And I want to thank everybody as well on this call for your attentiveness and your participation today. Hope to see many of you at the event in a couple of weeks' time in New York. And with that, I want to thank you so much and have a wonderful